Hi, everyone. Welcome to our third workshop of the fall. Um, my name is Sarah Blahovic. I am the co-founder and co-director of Disability Victory. Welcome to tonight's training on crafting a campaign and policies rooted in disability rights. As I said, my name is Sarah Blahovic. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a white woman with shoulder length brown hair. I'm wearing glasses and a blue shirt, and I have a blurred background behind me. Before I hand it over to today's trainer, I have a few accessibility and housekeeping notes. So we do have ASL interpretation. I will have that pinned on screen throughout, but we also have an ASL interpretation feature in Zoom that brings up a resizable window. You will go to your menu, and it is, let me see here, go to the bottom of the screen and click the interpretation icon. If you are on a smaller screen, you might have to click more and then click interpretation and then choose the American Sign Language channel. To view closed captioning, click show captions in the icon along the menu ribbon. You can also view captions in stream text. I will put the stream text link in the chat in a few minutes. We will be having kind of an interactive component to this today, both for asking questions and responding to our trainers' questions. For asking questions and sharing responses, you can share them in the chat with myself, with Neil, who I will also pin on screen here. Or with Rebecca, our trainer, and we will read them out, or you can hit the raise hand icon and we can give you the mic. If you are on the phone, which I don't think anyone is on the phone, we will, you'll just press 1 and that should raise your hand. By default, you can only chat with the hosts and panelists for this event. We do this so that we can voice all messages, and also because people who are using assistive technology won't have to hear every message coming through, which can be a little bit distracting. We are recording today's session and will inform you once that recording is available. For those who are new to Disability Victory, a little bit about us. Disability Victory is a 501c4 organization. Our mission is to build the political power of disabled progressives through training, networking, and leadership development. We envision a country where disabled people have the information, support, and skills they need to successfully lead as candidates, elected officials, and campaign staff. Learn more and make sure to sign up for our mailing list for updates at disabilityvictory.org. Let me go to the next slide here and introduce today's presenter, our board secretary, Rebecca Lamort. Rebecca grew up on Long Island and now calls New York City home. After a 2013 subway accident left her partially disabled, she saw an intimate portrait of how New York can work better for all communities and began her efforts to make New York City more accessible and inclusive. She graduated from Fordham University in 2013 and built a career in the labor movement, working for some of New York's most prominent unions, coordinating legislative and issue-based campaigns. On campaigns like the Fight for 15, for example, Rebecca observed how progressive policies can lead to tangible benefits for New Yorkers who are too often overlooked. Drawing on her personal experiences as a disabled New Yorker and professional experience with government, Rebecca ran for New York City Council in 2021 in Manhattan's 5th District, which includes Midtown East, the Upper East Side, Yorkville, East Harlem, and Roosevelt Island. Her campaign was centered on disability rights and the needs of disabled and vulnerable New Yorkers. While not successful in winning her election, Rebecca's campaign shifted the paradigm of local political engagement in New York, moving focused more towards accessibility and disability rights as a part of all policy decisions in public life. Following her campaign, Rebecca has been featured in the Emmy-nominated interactive series Inaccessible Cities and on the Tamron Hall Show for her work on disability issues. Her work has been published in the New York Daily News and Teen Vogue. And with that, I will hand it over to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for joining me tonight. I'm Rebecca Lamort. I use she, her pronouns. To start with a visual description, I'm a white woman with brown curly hair standing in front of bookshelves with some really fun books, a green and white sign that says solidarity as a union person, and some fun, funky earrings with my black turtleneck. And I'm so happy to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, our ASL interpreters, our CART captioners. Thank you, everyone, for joining me to talk about something that is not just personal to me, but I know personal to so many people on this webinar tonight. How to run for office as a disabled person, how to craft a campaign rooted in disability rights, focusing on disability justice, and being sure we're not just thinking about it in niche ways or assigning people with disabilities to policy silos like we see too often happen in electoral campaigns and in politics and government, but viewing this through a lens of intersectionality, where disabled people, disability issues, disability rights by the end of this webinar, my hope is that you'll view them as a part of every decision you make on the campaign, every plan you put out, every event you host, every policy that you talk about. And so now to dive in a little bit deeper, and as Sarah said, we are going to get interactive, so please don't be shy. There are no bad ideas. There are no wrong answers. I know when I was running and learning about disability issues, even as a disabled woman, learning about accessibility tools for my campaign, I didn't know everything. And I think it's important to start from that place that we don't know it all. We don't all have every experience as a candidate with a disability, as a person with a disability on a campaign staff, for example. But working together, having conversations like this and taking the step to join us tonight for this webinar shows that you want to be a part of that change long-term to make sure that the almost 61 million disabled Americans have a voice in government, have a seat at the table in the halls of power where decisions are being made that too often harm us when there are opportunities to have them help us in real ways. So today we're going to learn how to run a campaign consciously focusing on the intersectionality of disability issues and weaving them into every policy and aspect of your campaign. We're also going to learn how to think holistically about policy issues and notice opportunities for disability rights in unexpected places and unexpected policy areas in other people's minds. But for us, we have a place in all of those policies. And finally, we're going to talk about how to add accessibility to your campaign's day-to-day functions. That's things like social media, opening with a visual description like I did at events, putting alt text on your images, so many different tools. And so now let's dive in. And let's pivot and let's go to our next slide with an introduction to really kind of set the table. And this comes from my amazing Disability Victory fellow board member, as I like to think of it as my Disability Victory family member, Dom Kelly, who comes from Georgia and is doing amazing work with New Disabled South, was very, very active and an integral part of Stacey Abrams' campaign for governor in Georgia. And this quote really sets the table for why we're having this conversation, why it's important to have groups like Disability Victory, why it's important to have conversations like we are tonight as disabled people running for office and wanting to effectuate this change. For too long, campaigns have failed to meet even the most basic standards of accessibility. They've shown time and time again that the disability community is not a priority constituency. There can no longer be any excuse to exclude the, at minimum, 61 million disabled people in this country. Deaf folks should not have to beg for ASL interpreters at events. Advocates should not have to tweet at candidates to ask that they include captions in their videos or alt text on their images. Disabled people should not have to be excluded from working on campaigns because those in leadership don't care to create a culture that is both accessible and inclusive. Candidates can no longer ignore the disability community, full stop. And those words really set the table nicely as we dive into our larger conversation. So now I'm going to open it up to the group. We're going to have our first interactive question here as we move to our next slide. What does it mean to have a campaign rooted in disability justice? And I want you to think about that while I discuss this a little bit more, and then we're going to open it up, use the raise hand function in Zoom if you want to shout out an answer. Sarah or Neil will unmute you two. If you're more comfortable, drop it in the chat to myself, to Sarah, to Neil, and we'll shout out your answers. But I want to know, what does it mean to you to have a campaign rooted in disability rights? Disability rights are defined as the rights of disabled people to be treated without discrimination and to experience equality in opportunity with abled people, But in practice and in politics, it means so much more. In politics, disability rights means actively thinking about and working to include disabled people in issues at the very core of your campaign values. It means running as a candidate with a disability, hiring people with disabilities as campaign staff, holding accessible events in person and online, including captions on videos, alt text, and more. And finally, it means creating a policy platform that includes people with disabilities, and not just for specific policies, but all policies. And now through that lens, I want to hear from you right now before we go any further. What does it mean to you to have a campaign rooted in disability rights? Raise your hand, we'll unmute you, drop it in the chat so we can see. Don't be shy, there are no wrong answers. Oh, I see Adam has raised. Oh, I see we have some hands raised. Let's do some unmuting if we're able. Who do we have first?
Oh, sorry. Adam, do you want to go first?
Yes. What I believe disability means, it means full equality. And I believe that this is great that that this group was created in 2023. It should have been created a long time ago. Thank you.
Amen to that, Adam. Amen to that. All right, who else do we have? I see some more hands.
Hello? My name is Christy. There's a little bit of feedback. For me, running and in just this big wackadoodle that is politics is to take down another barrier for people. Just invisible disabilities are a thing, and if anything, if I can get through this wackadoodle to encourage more people in this community to just jump in, because civic engagement is for everyone, and it's about time that we just show up and show out, is what it means to me.
I love that. Show up and show out. I enter my space, every space, as the disabled woman I am, and I love that, Christy. Show up and show out. Who else do we have? I see some more hands.
Hi, my connection is bad, so I apologize if I cut out. But for me, I think it means not having just a specific section on disability policies as your platform, but that disability is integrated into each of your policies. For example, transportation, talking about infrastructure, talking about accessible sidewalks, when talking about community constituent services, talking about making those accessible digitally, virtually, what have you.
Molly, I love it. And it's almost as if you're stealing part of my presentation for later. Okay. But I love it. Great points. And dropped in my chat from Skylar, we have rooted in disability rights. To Skylar means to follow the metaphor. It means to grow from and is nourished by disability rights advocacy. And that is so true too, because we ourselves as the candidate, as the staff, we have to be rooted in this space. We have to live and breathe this every day, as many of us already do, but now we have to do it in a different way, where we communicate our experiences to the outside community. We communicate why things are disability issues when someone may not. Molly, like you said, it's not about having disability issues. At the very end of your policy platform tab on your website, where it mentions Medicare, Medicaid, it mentions accessible public transit, but that's it. So having a campaign rooted in disability rights, all of your answers were correct. It's about making sure that we're showing up, we're showing out, we're being proud as ourselves, we're being bold, we're being big, even when people don't want to hear from us, or they say this isn't a disability issue, it's not about you. Well, guess what? There's 61 million of us, so it is always about us as people with disabilities. But now let's take it a step further. What does it mean in practice, though? So now as we pivot to our next slide, in practice in politics, running a campaign rooted in disability rights means making sure disability rights and people with disabilities are a part of or involved in your campaign at both macro and micro levels. So macro is thinking big. For me, as a former candidate, when I chose to run for office, I knew my campaign was going to be centered on disability issues. No matter what else happened, no matter what else was going on in the policy world, in New York City, COVID was going on, but it didn't matter, because all of those issues, every single thing can be viewed through the lens of disability rights, of disability justice, through my lens as a woman with a disability, calling New York City home and wanting to have a seat at the table for all of us. So at the macro level, that's your campaign focus and goal. Like I just shared mine. What's your goal? What's your purpose? Why are you running for? And if it's those disability issues, then you already answered that question. It's policy development. I firmly believed as a candidate, letting the issues, letting the policies drive the campaign is what's going to take you further, because you're giving people tangible goals. You're giving them something to organize around, to push for, to believe in. Yeah, we all want good schools. Yeah, we all want housing, but take it a step further. Make it more real. Put serious policy plans in place that don't just mention accessible housing, for example, if we're talking about affordable housing, but it takes it a step further. How many units of affordable, accessible housing do we want to see? We want them to be affordable in perpetuity, AKA forever, because guess what? We're disabled forever as people with disabilities, and our housing affordability and the needs we have don't change over time. So that's thinking of things through the macro level. And now as we pivot to the micro level, that's your day-to-day interactions. That's day-to-day operations with your staff, making sure that you're giving people the space they need for their own health, for their own personal time, because I know the space I need, I know the time I need at points with my disability, and I want to be sure I'm giving that back to the people that are supporting me in my campaign. That's not just paid staff, that's also volunteers. Those are your community members, those are your neighbors. Day-to-day operations are also the events that you run on a campaign. Are you running accessible events? I personally think about how many times I've been invited to events that are in inaccessible places. I had one in-person debate during my campaign for city council. It was hosted at an inaccessible church with multiple flights of stairs. And I was there as a candidate with a disability over a year into my campaign, and nobody batted an eyelash about inviting me to that event or thought that perhaps they should make it accessible. So think of it through the micro level. Are you running accessible events? Are you inviting your neighbors if you're not a candidate with a disability, but you want to run a disability-centered campaign? Is your event in an accessible space? Do you have ASL? Do you have captions if you're going to be doing a Zoom like this, for example? And taking it a step further into our social media, which is an amazing tool for disabled candidates. There were times I couldn't get out to the electorate that I wanted to. I physically could not walk, whatever it was that I was dealing with that day with my disability. Using social media got me closer to people. It allowed me to communicate with them when I couldn't perhaps be before them, and especially with the global pandemic going on like it still is. So using social media, but making sure, again, we're folding disability rights into our social media. We're folding accessibility into all of these spaces, because many people silo people with disabilities and disability issues, like we talked about, where it's that little tab at the bottom of the policy platform, one little sentence on a campaign website about how we support people with disabilities. But it needs to be more than that. We have a role and a place in every part of the campaign. So right now, this isn't an interactive question, but I'm going to give you a minute. I want you to think about a policy issue, an event, an action coming up with your campaign, with a campaign close to you, one you're working on, maybe one you want to kick off soon as a candidate. Think about it right now. Keep it in your mind. And as we continue talking about these issues, viewing things through the lens of disability justice, creating a campaign where we're thinking about these issues first and not last, like so many people unfortunately do. By the end of this presentation, I'm going to ask you to shout out or drop in the chat like we did before, what an event you were thinking of, what policy you were thinking of, what action you were thinking of, and perhaps how through this conversation, through this webinar tonight, you've come to view it in a different way. You've come to think of it now as a disability issue. You've come to realize this event I was going to host, oh my gosh, it's down a flight of stairs and there's no elevator, there's no escalator. Oh my gosh, I was going to have an in-person event, but there's no ASL interpreter. Thinking of things through that lens. So right now I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to look at my watch, my little Apple Watch here. You got exactly 1 minute. Think about it. Choose your issue. I didn't ask Sarah and Neil to play the Jeopardy music, but now I regret that and I wish I had. So everyone take a moment, think it over. Do you want me to sing it to you? Do, 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 do. All right, have we chosen our issues? Have we thought about it? All right, now let's pivot then. You've chosen your issue. Let's make it about people with disabilities. And remember, we're thinking about this first, not last. So candidates and campaigns are finally focusing on disability issues and acknowledging the need to include people with disabilities in decision-making. And that's things from seeing the Vice President Kamala Harris open up an official government meeting with a visual description of herself. I'm sure a number of us here saw the coverage in the media, people mocking her, laughing at her. Why is she describing herself? Why is she telling people what she looks like? We know what she looks like. No. Us as people with disabilities, we saw that, and I personally loved it. That was the first time someone in federal elected office at the top executive level folded that accessibility tool into a public meeting, making sure they were leading with accessibility, not thinking of it after the fact. So that's a great example of how we're folding disability and accessibility into more government spaces, into electoral politics, but there's still more to do. And to help you think about these issues, help you think through this lens, let's go through and look at some examples. So now as we pivot, going to be a little pompous here. We are going to kick off with my own platform, but again, let's remember how we're viewing things through this lens. So as we pivot to the next slide, when we're viewing issues and campaigns through the lens of disability, for example, like I said, housing. It's not housing, it's affordable, accessible housing. Public transportation. It's not just that we need subways and buses that are affordable for everyone. And how do we define affordable? That's a different policy conversation. We're not here for that today. It's accessible public transportation. When we're thinking about making our campaign kickoff video, I did it. It should be a campaign video with captions though. It's not just about having a beautiful video where you look great and you're hitting your points and you're communicating your issue and you're kicking your campaign off strong. How many people in your community may not have been able to know what you were saying because you didn't have captions on that video? Thinking of it through that lens. And finally, we have to get out the vote, right? We have to have a get out the vote rally, but not if it's not accessible, including American Sign Language at the Get Out the Vote rally, including holding it in a space that's fully accessible. So now as we pivot and we look at some examples, like I said, I will, be a little bit of a pompous person here, but we are going to look at my campaign as a first example. So in 2021, as Sarah mentioned in the opening, I ran for New York City Council in Manhattan's 5th District, a district I have called home now for 10 years. From 2013, I moved here shortly before I was pushed on the subway. And that day in December 2013 changed my life forever. And it made me want to fight, not just for myself, but for everyone else that didn't have a seat at the table, didn't have a voice in the halls of power in government, didn't have someone to fight back and speak for them. And also through my own personal experiences, facing discrimination, facing barriers to the help I needed. And I say that as a white woman with a lot of privilege and an invisible disability. So I felt very strongly, if this is what I'm facing, if this is my experience, what are other people dealing with? What is happening to someone else that doesn't have this space, doesn't have this knowledge, doesn't have this power? And that led me to run for public office. And that led me to run for public office, though, on a campaign centered on disability issues, on disability justice, as a candidate saying, I am disabled. This is my everyday experience. This is my everyday life. And if politics is public life, then hell, we have to make politics more inclusive for everyone. And so the first policy platform I put out that was very personal to me, and there's so many people I could shout out to thank me for putting it together, but two big names come to mind, Sarah Fish and Tori Cross. Thank you so much for your help with this. And my disability justice platform was the first one I put out. And that led me to doing a lot of things I'm talking to you about tonight. It led to me thinking holistically about disability issues, not just in individual silos like people so often do with us, but as a part of every issue. And now as we look at these two original graphics, which was very fun and nostalgic for me to pull up from my campaign while working on this presentation, when we look at the topics that the disability justice platform includes, and Sarah dropped in the chat the full platform if you want to view it, so you can see some of the examples and how it touches on taking an issue, but then folding in the accessibility in a way that people not have been thinking about at the time. But when you look at these issues, COVID-19, yes, of course, it's a disability issue. It still is today. While some people are masking, some people are not, some people are still at home because of health and safety issues, and we're not addressing those needs. We're not seeing people get vaccinated at the rates that they should be now to continue community care and safety. Transportation, streetscape. Before, someone shouted out, I believe it was Molly, that if we're doing infrastructure, it's about making sure our sidewalks are accessible too. Imagine being a wheelchair user and seeing these huge grates in the sidewalk, huge gaps. How can you safely navigate over that? What if there isn't a curb cut in your community? And there are so many communities still in New York City that don't have curb cuts, for example. So if you're a wheelchair user or even a non-disabled person with a stroller or a large piece of luggage, what are you doing? And people wouldn't think of our streetscape as a disability issue, but it is. Employment and financial security, job rates, income issues within the disability community are rampant. And that's because of the government structures that keep people in a cycle of poverty. That's also because of discrimination for disabled people in the workforce. But people aren't thinking about that. And for my policy platform, I included things like ending the sub-minimum wage in New York, because right now disabled people can make as little as 25 cents an hour simply because they're disabled. And that's not right. And so many people did not know that that was still the case in New York. So viewing workforce issues through that lens and pulling in the disability pieces. One of my favorite things on this policy platform that people did not think was a disability issue, policing and public safety. Many people said, what disability issues are there? Well, I'm not deaf or hard of hearing, but imagine if you needed your hands to sign and your hands were cuffed behind your back and you couldn't communicate. And that's the norm for police. And the NYPD, and I'm sure it's the same for other police departments, didn't have ASL interpreters they were deploying. They didn't have officers that were aware of this and knew to pause and stop and say, oh, this person is not ignoring me. They're not responding to me. This is an escalation. I have to go harder at them. They couldn't communicate with me because I took their hands from them, and that's how they communicate. And that's a very small example of policing, but being able to give life to those issues and shine a light on how accessibility and disability rights have to be included even in those law enforcement moments. I loved, and it sounds weird to say I loved that, but I did, and I still do, because it sparked awareness for people in ways they wouldn't have thought about. How many people that aren't deaf or hard of hearing ever realized, oh my gosh, if I handcuff someone, how will they communicate with me? Oh my gosh, will they probably be incarcerated and maybe face a harsher time because there was a miscommunication and they needed that support, which the ADA and the government should be there to do, but we're not connecting these dots. And I loved sparking that awareness, because that only happens when you have, unfortunately, but it's the reality, and many of us in this space know that only happens when you have a disabled person in the room, when people with disabilities have a seat at the table where decisions are being made. Because if we don't have a seat at the table, we're on the menu. We're getting cut up and carved for dinner. We're getting served out to everyone, not knowing what's going to happen to us, with them not caring also what happens to us. And so my work as a candidate, I purposely focused on injecting disability rights into every one of these policies here before you, making sure that my events were accessible. There were times I wanted to host events, but if I didn't have the funds in my campaign account to get ASL, to get captions, to get CART, whatever it was for full accessibility, I said no to hosting that event, knowing it could harm me as the candidate, knowing it could harm my campaign. But it was more important to me to run a campaign truly rooted in disability rights with disability justice than to have a partially accessible event. Because to me, partial accessibility is inaccessibility, full stop. And we're all guilty of it at certain times. I myself as a disabled person I am here to own that. And I ask all of you to own that as well, where we're not going to be perfect every time. But when we wake up and we try every day to be sure that we're running an accessible campaign, we're focusing on disability issues first and foremost, we're viewing every decision and every policy through that lens of disability rights, we're showing up and we're showing out, as Christy said, in the ways that we can, and working to effectuate this change long-term, working to put ourselves in these spaces, even if we come out imperfect at the first try, even if someone says, hey, those captions were terrible, hey, your visual description sucked, that's okay. Because you tried and you failed, but you probably learned something along the way. For example, now my alt text is very playful and fun. At first, my first few campaign images where I put alt text on them, it would be Rebecca at campaign rally with Kane and campaign lit. That's so impersonal. That's not fun. If I read that or had that read to me, rather, I wouldn't know what I was seeing. I wouldn't know what to think was going on. And now, I'm Rebecca, a white woman with curly brown hair, smiling coyly as I lean against steps in Jamaica, smiling contently. I inject emotion, I inject personality, and that only comes from practice, from failing, from learning, from growing. And so if your first few tries aren't good, if you come up with a policy platform and you're like, oh, I don't think this is enough. Oh, I haven't dug deep enough. Oh, I'm not thinking holistically. I'm not thinking long-term enough, but you're still trying. And the fact that you're even having those thoughts, wanting to push yourself more, and again, that you showed up here tonight shows that you want to be a part of this change. And that again, even if it's not perfect the first time, you're going to get it right. And you're going to show someone else that they can do it too. And now another example that is even bigger than me and amazing and wonderful. And I really wish they had won. But now as we pivot to our next slide with Stacey Abrams and her campaign for governor in Georgia. And again, I got to give a shout out to my Disability Victory Board family member, Dom Kelly, because he really broke the mold, working with Stacey's campaign, making sure that it was one not just rooted in disability rights, but taking that to the next level, where the campaign had an Office of Disability Engagement and Accessibility with a department of 9 staff members, which affirm the value and importance of people with disabilities in political engagement and also in policy making. Because don't just say you want me to turn out and vote for you. Okay, if I do that, what are you doing for me on the other side as your constituent? What do I have to believe in? What policy change are you going to effectuate for me? Don't just say it's accessible public transportation. I don't just ride the subway every day, for example. I live a whole life as a disabled person. What else are you going to do for me? What else are you going to address in my life? How are you going to make me a part of every policy decision you make and every long-term decision you make in office? And Stacey Abrams' campaign did an amazing job of that, from hiring people with disabilities, folding accessibility into all of their campaigns and events, including on social media. Now, when we're here on the screen, as we look at this slide, we have some really great examples. So we have a headline: Stacey Abrams' campaign has 2 deaf staffers and 2 ASL interpreters. And you may just say, only 2? But if the starting point was 0 for other campaigns leading up to now, for how many years of campaigns they've been going on in Georgia and the United States as a whole, I will take those 2 deaf staffers and I will take those 2 ASL interpreters, and I will be very happy that this campaign focused on it and prioritized it and didn't just say, oh my gosh, we're about to have this event, we need ASL last minute, which happens too often. Stacey and her campaign thought about it first, not last. And that's the model we need to be following as we craft a campaign rooted in disability rights, running as a candidate rooted in disability rights. Another great headline: Stacey Abrams wants more Georgians with disabilities to be able to live independently. That's a great example of how she folded into her policy platform something that a lot of non-disabled people don't really think about. They go home, they live independently, they take it for granted. They don't think about how government programs, government subsidies, healthcare programs can keep people from having the support they need, the dignity they have at home, the respect they want to have for themselves to live independently. And Stacey Abrams took that on full force, folded it into her policy platform, campaigned on it openly and boldly. And that's an example of thinking first again, not last about disabled people. Don't put out a policy platform that's for everyone but me. Fold me into that policy platform. Mention me as a part of your first policy push. Don't send me an update after saying, I've unveiled my disability justice platform now, if you've already put out everything else and you're just before Election Day. And again, this is a great example of a candidate doing it first in policymaking, not last. Other examples, I've talked a lot about social media. Stacey Abrams' campaign did a great job folding accessibility into her social media. So that's everything from alt text, which is an image description. So for example, we have an image here of Stacey Abrams. I would describe that as Stacey Abrams, a Black woman sitting in front of a bookshelf with a plant over her shoulder, wearing a purple shirt with a beige blazer. That's an example that would be in alt text. Her image had a description. That was a blueprint for change down there. Most candidates, including her opponent in the governor's race, was not doing that. And she helped change that mold where we are now seeing more candidates do it. It's not perfect, but someone had to lead that charge. And for me, it's even more impactful that it was a non-disabled person. It was an able-bodied person that surrounded herself with people with disabilities, thought about these issues first, not last, like I keep saying, and folded it into every aspect of her campaign, knowing this may not be my experience, this may not be personal to me, but it's personal to the people I care about. It's personal to the people I want to represent. And that's also why it's important to focus on these issues. When we also look at this example, it's from Twitter. It's a screenshot of a video that has captions and ASL. So think about that. She has a video, she has captions, she has ASL. She's doing it all. She's the holy grail. That's the model you want to be following for your campaign social media, making sure that you're, again, not just putting out that campaign launch video so people see it. Will the press pick it up? I want to get out there before my opponents. No. Make sure everyone in your constituency knows what's in that video and is able to enjoy that content all the same. Because if you're not, you're ignoring a huge part of your electorate. And it's a part of the electorate that, like myself, like you, like others here on this webinar tonight, have been ignored for far too long. And when you're in this space and you have this opportunity, we can undo those barriers. We can break down those barriers that keep us as disabled people from wanting to turn out to vote, wanting to run for office, wanting to go out and say, hey, maybe I can work on this campaign. Hey, maybe I can volunteer in this space. And that leads me to another important point. Another thing that Stacey Abrams' campaign did was really focusing on different kinds of political engagement, different kinds of volunteer events, different kinds of voter outreach, because you have to meet your voters where they're at. And for voters with disabilities, if you're not running a campaign that's accessible, you're going to have to reach them in other ways. And also, depending on the infrastructure and the community you're running in, depending on the economics of your community, there's so many reasons why perhaps someone can't come out to your event and you have to get to them a different way. Are you going to hold remote phone banking opportunities that have accessibility tools tucked in? So someone at home, if that's where they're best, that's where they're safest, they can make calls, they can be a part of your campaign. They can talk about why you need to be in elected office to fight for people like them, to fight for everyone, mostly including first and foremost, people with disabilities, because we're first, we're not last when we're running for office and when we're thinking about these things. So even making sure our volunteer opportunities are not one size fits all. We have different opportunities. We have different events where we're offering accessibility tools. We're offering engagement opportunities in ways that are not your traditional come out, knock doors. Because guess what? Knocking doors isn't easy. And it's not something also everyone wants to do, quite honestly. And that's something that, to pivot back to my campaign, we had a number of different kinds of events, similar to what Stacey Abrams did with her campaign. We made sure it was in-person events, when it became safe to do so with COVID, with mask rules, with distance rules, when people were vaccinated, and again, it was safe to do so, it was having remote events online at home to make sure that you could also participate if that's the best and most comfortable and easiest way for you to do so. It was using tools. Unfortunately, when we use VAN, the Voter Action Network, they don't tell you if a building is accessible or inaccessible. So my campaign staff, myself, and other volunteers, when we would be outdoor knocking, we would make a note if this building had stairs, or if it was a building with elevators that we were able to get access into. So we would know if there was a volunteer that wanted to help, perhaps they could do this walk sheet, perhaps they couldn't, for example. So just thinking about even your volunteer opportunities through that lens of disability rights, and not having a political campaign be one size fits all, but breaking that mold, getting creative, meeting people where they're at, and also making it more fun in that process. Because I know, for example, how old school campaigns can get a little boring. And now with all of our new tools, all of our new tech, we can have fun and we can get creative and be sure that we're engaging people in really open and accessible ways. And now as we come back to the issue that you chose, so about 10 minutes ago, I asked you to think about an issue. Policy issue, campaign event, action coming up, something. And I want you to think about now, I'm going to give you another minute. I won't sing you the Jeopardy song again. I'll let you do it independently and quietly this time. But I want you to think, how are you going to include people with disabilities in this issue, in this event, in this action? What are you going to change perhaps about what you were planning or what you were thinking about doing to inject disability rights into your campaign? And mostly, how will you ensure you're creating a space that is inclusive and welcoming for people with disabilities on your campaign, through this issue, at this event, at this rally, whatever it may be? So now take a minute, think it over, because after that, we're going to open it up and I want to get a little interactive and I'm going to want to hear from you. Talk to me about your policy issue. Talk to me about your event coming up. Share with me what you may change, what you may not change, how you've realized, oh my God, it was so great. And I was already thinking about this before I even came here tonight. Take a moment and then we're going to open it up. So I'm going to, again, check my nifty little Apple Watch, giving you a minute, think it over. I already see some hands raised, but let's just give it a minute. Let's give it a minute. And again, there are no wrong answers. There are no bad ideas. If you want to use this time to say, hey, I was thinking about X and I don't know how to make it Y, can you help me? That's also this space. Because something, as a former candidate with a disability, I know personally how I felt there was not a space to go to have conversations like this. I know how at times I felt very alone when I had these questions or was trying to figure out different accessibility tools or thinking through my policy ideas. And I was very lucky to find my place within the disability community, to connect with some really great policy people, pardon my language, but some kick-ass advocates in our disability community that helped me learn and grow. And now if I can be that for you, that's what this space is for. That's what Disability Victory is for. So now with that, we have our final 15 minutes left in the webinar. We're going to open it up and I want to hear from you. What issue did you choose? Did it work already through this lens of disability rights? Did you have to change it? Are you going to change it? What are you looking at? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Raise your hand. We'll unmute, drop it in the chat to myself, to Neil, to Sarah, and we'll read it out to the group. But now I want to hear from you. I already see some hands. So who's going to go first?
I'll go first. Sorry.
No apologies. We're not apologizing for taking up space as disabled people tonight. No apologies.
All right.
No apologies.
All right.
Now you can go.
But it made me think about if I run for office, how to include maybe sign language, maybe buildings that are more accessible. But there's one thing that made me leery, is not to focus all your attention on disability issues when you run for a political campaign, because I ran for 2 offices a local race in 2016 Dane County Board of Supervisors in Wisconsin, and I made a mistake by focusing too much on disability issues. We also need, maybe someday we'll have to take a page out of the Victory Fund, Victory Institute, if you guys heard of it, the LGBTQ organization, on how not to always concentrate just on disability issues, but in general, how to broaden it to include everybody. So that's where I kind of find contention, even though I agree with what you say. I think we need to, and the policy issues, which I've been seriously thinking about, because maybe someday I may want to run for federal office. I may want to, maybe Congress or something, and the things that I'm more concerned about is work, how to get more people employed by reforming Medicaid, because there's a lot of barriers to Medicaid. I could go on and on about these issues, and to reform long-term care to include people with mental health problems. I could go on and on and on. Improve Social Security, and Section 8 to have mixed, ability, not to put all these people, not to put all people with disabilities and the elderly together, but have mixed use housing, which I'm in favor for. So, and I don't mean to go on and on. I'll let other people go, but these are my main issues, and Medicare and even private insurance to, have it extensive as Medicaid and Medicare too. I don't
Adam,
mean to
you
go on and
brought up
on.
an amazing point. So during my campaign, exactly what you said about focusing too much on disability issues, that I dealt with that personally in my race. There were a number of people that said, Rebecca, get elected and then talk about these things. It doesn't affect enough people. And that's something that I feel really strongly about, being a force to focus more on these issues, on running as a candidate with disability, on the intersectionality of putting disability issues into every policy where we're saying, yeah, that's a disability issue. Yeah, we're going to talk about our streetscape. Yeah, we're going to talk about policing, and we're going to focus on it through the lens of disability rights, not just for able-bodied people, because we as disabled people, we interact with these same programs and these same problems. But that was a critique I specifically got. So Adam, when I heard you say that, I was like, ooh, that one stings, because I know how difficult it is to hear that as the candidate with disability, where it's like, you're a niche issue. We're not niche issues. There are millions of disabled people, but it is about striking that balance where we are open, we are loud and proud, we're showing up, we're showing out, as Christy said when we kicked it off earlier, but we're making sure we're also focusing on other pieces of the electorate. Because when we run a political campaign, what's our main goal? What do we want at the end of the day? It's not to have good talks and good feels. It's to win our race. It's to get elected, right? Because to effectuate this change, we got to get those votes. We got to get that W. We have to win. We have to get in office. So Adam, it's a yes and in my response to you. Yes, we cannot just focus exclusively on disability issues. Yes, we cannot just exclusively talk about being disabled candidates, about people with disabilities. And we can also fold these conversations when appropriate, when we're in spaces where we can, into every policy conversation, into every campaign plan that we make, where people may not realize we're focusing on disability rights. We're planning through a perspective for people with disabilities, but we know personally that's what we're leading with. That's our core value. And at times we may have to, shapeshift and talk about other things that able-bodied people care about, but we're still committed to our core values. So thank you so much for that comment, Adam. That is a really, really great point to point out. And I thank you for bringing that up. Before we go to our next hand, I'm just going to pivot to the chat. dropped to me from Greg Green. Thank you so much. There is unity in community, commenting on Adam's comments. I absolutely agree. The intersectionality about how disabled people is a marginalized community and how that impacts other communities and how we can have strength in numbers, solidarity. When we organize together, we grow together, we win together. Greg, I completely agree with you. More comments. I'm reading that you would like to call this a second wave of disability rights, and it's timely. It absolutely is. The Americans with Disabilities Act is a little over 30 years old, just like myself, and it's time we have to take that even further. The Americans with Disabilities Act was a great start. It's a great blueprint for change. But how do we take that even further now? Look at tech. How do we fold accessibility into our laws for tech to make sure that government meetings have CART, have ASL, have captions? Why am I a community board member that has community board events hosted up until the last 5 years in inaccessible spaces? Why is that happening? That's happening because we don't have anyone in office speaking about these issues, making sure that we're focusing on them first, not last. And the Americans with Disabilities Act doesn't address that, for example. So taking things even further. Before we go to our next hand, another comment in the chat from Skylar. Love that you're going to brainstorm your policy platform by organizing it in tables and labeled by policy and columns, labeled by identity factors. I love that. Organizing it for yourself where you can see what you're working on, who you're focusing on, who it's going to help and who it's going to impact. You'll also see the intersectionality of so many issues that people with disabilities face, people with disabilities want to see addressed. There are things that can help other people that aren't disabled, that may not be disabled right now, but guess what? The disability community is so big and so great. Anyone can join it at any time. I did at 22 from being pushed on the subway, and making sure that we're identifying factors that can help people that may not realize they're going to need this support at one point in time. All right, let's pivot to our next hand. I see we still have some hands up. We have 9 minutes. I apologize. I am once I get on my disability justice soapbox, it's tough for me to get down, but let's go to our next hand.
Oh, Christy? Should allow
Oh,
you
show up, show out, Christy.
All right, this is clicking fun right there. So if anything, what my takeaway is to add more accessibility to it, because why not? So I actually just came from Manhattan like 24 hours ago. Like, yeah, now I'm back in California. Good gravy. So right here in California, Contra Costa County, they have this plan of making the county walkable, right? Which is great. It sounds very nice. What I'm going to kind of press them on is, okay, so you use tax money to pay for the consultant to tell you to make it more walkable, accessible for people of different abilities, right? So let's put a timeline on that and follow up on that versus you pay the consultant, you did the presentation, and then that's where it stops, which is kind of what happens here. And then just making sure when I'm bopping around, rather in any of my hats that I'm doing, is to make sure that we have an ASL interpreter to actually engage maybe the high school, the ASL club, to make sure that we have the captioning and just really reaching out to the different organizations out there. I know that we have a pretty solid disability council in the county, of just making sure that we are extending that invitation to them so then they can put it out to the greater community on their channels. So then we are able to show up and show out. So then people can see us, because normal campaigns that I've seen fixate on just, checking the boxes of what you normally do. And it's just, but there's this whole swath of people. So, and then to speak up to you, to Adam, what I have found helpful is doing the code switching instead of focusing on disability, saying, well, no, actually, and then flipping on them and saying that it's an equity issue. So we're trying to make our services and our, whatever's equitable for the full community. So you flip it on that, because then what their response is like, what, you're not okay with equality? please tell me more. And then they get stuck. So I found that was very helpful in shutting down quite a few people when they try to bait me in that sense. But living into the yes and really just asking them, so where's the follow of the people that are already elected into office that are doing these things to follow through, and then circle back around when they don't, just saying, I'm not mad, I just would like, I'm just following up as a constituent and what have you, and just putting it on them. So then it takes it off of us while we mobilize each other. Yep.
I love that. And listening to you, Christy, gave me a policy idea. For those people planning the walkable city, was there any person with a disability on the consulting team? Did they ask a person with a disability, say a cane user, a wheelchair user, a blind person? Did they engage them to be sure the walkable plan worked for them? And if not, well, then I think you need to show up and show out and say, we can't proceed with this plan until we get disability input, because we want to walk around our city too. We may do it differently, but this is the city we call home too. And now we're going to go to our final hand from Molly. Let's hear from Molly before we open it up for questions. So after we hear from Molly, if you have any questions in our final 5 minutes, drop them in the chat to Sarah, Neil, or myself, or use the raise hand function. Molly?
Hey, so I am in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I was thinking a lot about how surprisingly not right now, but I was thinking about how I just worked on my first winning campaign, which has been really great. But how it's very hard when you are working on a campaign where funds are tight and you're trying to connect with as many, marginalized groups as possible, like the more progressive candidates who are, speaking more for working families, and how when money's tight, you have to kind of choose between being able to be out in community or being entirely accessible. And being at this workshop is making me think a lot about how the money put into making things accessible by having, CART, ASL, picking a slightly more expensive venue for an event because it has ADA accessibility is more powerful in terms of getting votes also than just going for the more affordable option. So I'm just also thinking of like how you work to, for lack of a better term, like justify the cost to people who are new to disability access and disability justice. Something I'm thinking about.
Absolutely. And, there were cost prohibitive moments for me where I chose not to host the event because the accessibility was so important to me. But there are also other avenues. There's a lot of, as Christy mentioned, using your ASL club at a local high school. Maybe there's an ASL school where people can volunteer. There's a Facebook group I leaned heavily on that was pro bono ASL interpreters, because there would be times I didn't have the campaign funds, but I wanted to be sure I was offering this accessibility tool for my events and my Zooms, and using those free services while I still didn't have the monies. That's an opportunity as well. So hit Facebook, hit social media, ask around, look at college campuses to try and fit in those accessibility tools if it's cost prohibitive up front at the start. And now in our final few moments, if there are any questions, raise your hand using the raise hand function and we'll unmute you. Drop it in the chat to myself, to Sarah, to Neil. I know I threw a lot at everyone, and I tried not to speak too quickly. I'm very often a fast talker, so I hope I did better tonight for everyone.
I do see a question here. There was a woman with autism who ran for Congress last year. I'm blanking on her name, but she was in the state assembly, and I believe she's also Asian. Why do you think she lost the primary? I'm guessing that was Yuleen New.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
And New York State Assembly member Yuleen New. So that was an unfortunate situation where outside politics, obviously it impacts political races. So in that district, there was a lot of progressive voters that were Yulee News supporters, but then there were some more conservative Democrats, as I think of them, centrists, just to use it, but a term many of us probably understand. And that really divided the community. And unfortunately, that led to her as the more progressive Democrat losing to a more conservative Democrat named Grace Lee. She also, Yulee, chose to run for higher office. And so that changed the political paradigm in her neighborhood too. So there were a number of other things that impacted that, but Yulee was great to have in public office, one of few people with disabilities in elected office here in New York. It's a constituency that unfortunately we don't see enough people running for office and winning their elections if and when they do. There are a number of reasons why. Disability Victory, I'm sure at some point we will speak about what keeps people with disabilities from running for office, healthcare, job issues, personal health needs. There's so many issues that keep us from putting ourselves out there, but Yulee did it. And she was great to watch succeed until things unfortunately didn't go her way in the end, but hopefully she'll make another run for something soon. All right, we have 1 minute left. I will say, Greg Green, I love your walk and roll comment in my chat for the walkable cities. It should be a walk and roll. Anyone else in our final moment?
Yeah, and if there's anything that we can't get to tonight, we can always take it down and get back to you via email. But in the meantime, I did see one question for someone who joined late on whether this recording will be available. Yes, we are going to have it captioned, and once we're sure that the captions are accurate, we're going to upload it to our YouTube channel. And once that is done, I will be emailing everyone with the link to that. So you will be able to watch it for playback. But just wanted to say thank you so much, Rebecca, for a wonderful presentation, and thank you everyone for participating tonight. We're working hard to bring more Disability Victory training in 2024. So make sure that you are on our email list and stay tuned for that. I will also drop that in the chat. So we're going to be working hard on that. There's clearly a lot of motivation from the disability community to be able to run and to run a winning campaign that balances that disability lens with, how do you broaden it so that the entire community understands why this is important. So again, thank you, Rebecca. Any closing remarks before we go?
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me tonight, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Neil, our ASL interpreters, our CART captioners, our captions, everything. Thank you so much. I hope from tonight, you're thinking about things in a different way. You're viewing your issues, your campaign, your candidacy through the lens of disability rights. And please follow Disability Victory, join our email list. We are growing. We are changing the paradigm of political engagement here in the United States. And I want you to be a part of the change with us. So give us a follow, join our email list, and be sure to come back for some more great webinars and conversations we're going to have. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good night.